On a quiet Sunday morning in April 2010, a frantic 911 call shattered the peace in a suburban Minnesota neighborhood. Heidi Firkus, a 25-year-old woman, desperately reported an intruder breaking into her home. Moments later, the call ended with the sound of a gunshot. This chilling incident marked the beginning of a complex murder case that would take over a decade to resolve, leaving a family devastated and a community searching for answers. The death of Heidi Firkus initially appeared to be a tragic home invasion gone wrong. However, as investigators delved deeper into the circumstances surrounding her death, a web of financial troubles, deception, and marital strain began to emerge. The case would eventually lead to the conviction of the person closest to Heidi, her husband, Nick Firkus. This is the story of how a seemingly picture-perfect marriage ended in violence, and how justice was finally served after 13 long years. Heidi Marie Erickson was born into a loving family in Minnesota. Growing up, she was known for her vibrant personality, kind heart, and strong faith. Friends and family described her as a genuine and sincere young woman who embraced life with enthusiasm and warmth. Her brother, Peter Erickson, fondly remembered her as the quintessential little sister, caring, supportive, and always ready with a smile. Heidi's path crossed with Nick Firkus when she was just a freshman in high school, and he was a junior. They met through their church, where both were active members. The connection between them was immediate, and their relationship blossomed over the years. Those who knew them saw a couple deeply in love, sharing common values and a strong religious foundation. In 2005, Heidi and Nick tied the knot, embarking on what seemed to be a promising future together. Heidi, then 20 years old, was excited about starting her life with Nick. She held various entry-level jobs before securing a position at Securian, a financial services company. Nick, for his part, worked for his father's carpet cleaning business. The young couple appeared to have a solid start to their married life. In 2007, at the height of the housing market boom, they purchased their first home together in the Hamline Midway neighborhood of St. Paul, Minnesota. To those on the outside, Heidi and Nick seemed to be living the American dream, young, in love, and building a life together. However, beneath the surface of their seemingly idyllic life, cracks were beginning to form. The housing market crash of 2008 hit many homeowners hard, and the Firkuses were no exception. Their home, purchased at the peak of the market, quickly became a financial burden as property values plummeted. While financial strain can test any marriage, it became clear in hindsight that Nick and Heidi were handling their troubles very differently. Friends and family later reported that Heidi remained optimistic and hardworking, focused on building their future together. Nick, on the other hand, began to withdraw and, unbeknownst to Heidi, was making decisions that would have dire consequences for their financial stability. By the end of 2008, just a year after purchasing their home, the Firkuses were already receiving foreclosure notices. They had taken out 2 mortgages on the property, and keeping up with payments was becoming increasingly difficult. In the summer of 2009, their home was sold at a sheriff's auction, a fact that would later become a crucial point in the investigation. What made this situation particularly troubling was the apparent lack of communication between Nick and Heidi about their dire financial straits. While Nick was aware of the foreclosure and impending eviction, evidence suggested that Heidi was kept in the dark about the severity of their situation. This deception would later be seen as a key factor in the events that unfolded. On the morning of April 25, 2010, the day before the Firkuses were scheduled to be evicted from their home, tragedy struck. At approximately 6:30 a.m., Heidi Firkus made a frantic call to 911, reporting that someone was trying to break into their house. The call ended abruptly with the sound of a gunshot and Heidi's scream. Moments later, Nick Firkus called 911 from Heidi's phone, claiming that an intruder had broken in and shot both him and his wife. When police arrived at the scene, they found Heidi dead from a shotgun wound to her back. Nick had sustained a gunshot wound to his thigh and was transported to the hospital for treatment. The 911 calls made that morning will become crucial pieces of evidence in the case. Heidi's call, lasting just 38 seconds, captured her fear and confusion in her final moments. "Someone's trying to break into my home," she told the operator, her voice filled with panic. Near the end of the call, a loud noise is heard, followed by Heidi's scream. Approximately 65 seconds after Heidi's call ended, Nick Firkus called 911 using Heidi's phone. "Somebody just broke in my house and shot me and my wife," he told the operator. He described a struggle with an intruder over his shotgun, claiming that during the scuffle, the gun went off, hitting Heidi in the back as she tried to run away. Nick said he was then shot in the leg before the intruder fled the scene. From the outset, investigators found aspects of Nick's story troubling. There were no signs of forced entry at the house, and neighbors reported not seeing anyone fleeing the scene. The layout of the house and the positioning of the borders also raised questions about the plausibility of Nick's account. As detectives dug deeper, they uncovered the Firkus' financial troubles and the impending eviction. This revelation cast Nick's story in a new light. Why hadn't Heidi mentioned the eviction to her family or friends? Why were there no signs of packing or preparation for a move? The case, however, proved challenging. Without concrete evidence to disprove Nick's intruder story, the investigation stalled. For years, Heidi's family lived with unanswered questions and a gnawing suspicion that they weren't getting the full truth about her death. Nick Firkus maintained his innocence throughout the investigation, insisting that an unknown intruder was responsible for Heidi's death. He even provided a sketch of the alleged assailant to the police. However, this sketch did not lead to any viable suspects, and no evidence of an intruder was ever found at the crime scene. The defense team later argued that there were tool marks on the door frame, suggesting someone had tried to force entry. They also pointed to testimony from a neighbor who claimed to have heard the voices during the incident. Despite these claims, prosecutors and investigators remained skeptical of the intruder theory, finding it inconsistent with the physical evidence at the scene. As investigators continued to probe, they began to piece together what they believed to be Nick Firkus' motive. Prosecutors argued that Nick, facing the shame and embarrassment of foreclosure and eviction, chose to murder his wife rather than admit to her the extent of their financial troubles. They painted a picture of a man who had presented himself as successful and capable, but was actually struggling to manage the couple's finances. The impending eviction threatened to expose his failures, not just to Heidi, but to their entire social circle. Prosecutors suggested that this fear of exposure and loss of status drove Nick to commit the unthinkable. For over a decade, the case remained unsolved. Nick Firkus remarried and started a new family. However, the investigation was far from over. In 2019, Sergeant Nicole Sipes of the St. Paul Police Department took over the case and began a thorough review of all the evidence. Sipes' investigation, conducted in collaboration with the FBI, uncovered new details about the Firkus' financial situation and the events leading up to Heidi's death. This renewed scrutiny, combined with advances in forensic technology, led to a breakthrough in the case. In May 2021, more than 11 years after Heidi's death, Nick Firkus was arrested and charged with second-degree murder. A grand jury later indicted him on charges of first-degree premeditated murder and second-degree intentional murder. The prosecution built their case on several key pieces of evidence. First, they pointed to the lack of any signs of an intruder at the crime scene. The only DNA found on the murder weapon belonged to Nick Firkus. Secondly, they highlighted the financial deception. Investigators found no evidence that Heidi was aware of the foreclosure or impending eviction. Her emails and communications with friends and family showed no indication that she knew they were about to lose their home. Perhaps most damning was evidence that came to light through Nick's second marriage. His ex-wife, Heidi Firkus, provided investigators with recordings of conversations in which Nick lied about their own financial troubles, a pattern that mirrored his behavior with Heidi. Rachel's testimony about Nick's secretive financial dealings and tendency to hide money problems from his spouse proved crucial in establishing a pattern of behavior. The trial of Nick Firkus began in January 2023, nearly 13 years after Heidi's death. Over the course of 11 days, the prosecution presented their case, arguing that Nick had murdered Heidi to avoid the shame of their financial collapse being exposed. The defense maintained Nick's innocence, arguing that there was no physical evidence directly linking him to the murder and insisting that an intruder was responsible. They also claimed that Heidi was aware of their financial situation and that the couple was planning their next steps together. On February 10, 2023, after 4 hours of deliberation, the jury found Nick Firkus guilty on 2 counts of murder. On April 13, 2023, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, the mandatory sentence for premeditated murder in Minnesota. Throughout the trial and even after his conviction, Nick Firkus maintained his innocence. At his sentencing hearing, he spoke publicly about the case for the first time, saying, "I do maintain and will maintain to my dying breath my innocence of this crime." Nick's father, Steve Firkus, also spoke at the sentencing, expressing his belief in his son's innocence. "To the depths of my heart, I know that he did not commit this terrible crime," he said. "For one moment, if we thought otherwise, we would have been the first to turn him into the authorities." The murder of Heidi Firkus and the subsequent conviction of her husband Nick serve as a tragic reminder of how financial pressures and deception can lead to devastating consequences. For 13 years, Heidi's family lived with uncertainty and grief, unable to fully mourn her loss while questions about her death remained unanswered. While the conviction of Nick Firkus brought a measure of closure to Heidi's loved ones, it also left them grappling with the painful reality of betrayal. As Heidi's mother, Linda Erickson, poignantly stated at the sentencing, the light of truth finally broke through the darkness of lies and deceit to make way for justice and accountability for Heidi's death. The case of Heidi Firkus serves as a sobering reminder of the importance of open communication in relationships, especially when it comes to financial matters. It also highlights the persistence of law enforcement in pursuing justice, even when years have passed. While nothing can bring Heidi back, her story continues to touch lives and serve as a cautionary tale about the devastating consequences of deception and the enduring pursuit of truth.